Howdy, y'all. Welcome to a Psalm for today, your reassuring voice that Jesus is Lord. Sometimes just a simple declaration of the Lordship of Jesus makes everything better. A friend of mine today reported that the doctors want to check to see if cancer has metastasized. And a great thing to say in a time like that is Jesus is Lord. Someone else has talked about financial challenges, and a good thing to say there is Jesus is Lord. Our psalm today is Psalm 60, verse number 12. But before we get there, I want to talk about an experience in my PhD program that was insightful. I think it was the first class that I took for this PhD program where they introduced us to the imposter syndrome. They said you need to know about the imposter syndrome because at moments in this program you are going to feel like you're a fraud, like you don't know what you're talking about, that you can't keep up, that you don't compare, that there's no hope for your education in this program. I thought, well, I've never had that imposter feeling. Why do I need to talk about that? I've always just said, okay, God, here we go. And I've pretty much been rolling on that until I'm in the data analysis phase of this qualitative research project. And the data analysis phase for many researchers, especially beginning researchers like moi, is the hardest part. And I remember feeling just the other day, okay, that's why they told us about the imposter syndrome. And I want to see if maybe you have the imposter syndrome from time to time in some of the things that you do. Number one, persistent self-doubt. The imposter syndrome recipients or people who experience the imposter syndrome often have persistent self-doubt. Academics frequently question their abilities, knowledge, and qualifications despite evidence of their competence. So it may be that today you are very competent in your field, but your brain is playing tricks with you on the imposter syndrome. That's entirely a possibility. And persistent self-doubt can be a challenge to the imposter syndrome recipient. Number two, attributing success to external factors. You do well and you go, yeah, I think the professor graded easy, or I think that I didn't really know what I was doing, I got lucky, or these kinds of things. And sometimes the imposter syndrome recipients attribute success to external factors. Number three, the imposter syndrome recipient also experiences a fear of failure. Intense worry about making mistakes or not meeting high standards, often leading to procrastination or overwork. Maybe that's something you experience. You experience a fear of failure and you just keep putting off your work, or maybe you have a fear of failure so you just work overboard. Number four, difficulty internalizing success. Very difficult for the imposter syndrome person to say, thank you for that compliment. I think God has been good and enabled me to do well. Number five is perfectionism. Setting unrealistically high standards and being overly critical of one's own work. So far in this program, if I remember correctly, I have a 3.89 GPA. Nobody cares about your GPA in a doctoral program. You either get it or you don't. But I was overly critical. I wanted to get 4.0, but I won't get 4.0. You can always come down on your GPA, but you can never go up, so to speak. Number six is comparison to peers. Constant measuring of oneself against colleagues, often feeling inadequate in comparison. If I understand correctly, the average PhD takes over 4 years to accomplish. Next month, I will begin my 4th year, and I should be done in 4 or 5 months, the Lord willing. But my co-learner, Hannah, Heavenly Hannah, if you're watching, she's like 30-year-old type brain, quick, fast, brilliant. And I'm watching her. She's done. She is now Dr. Hannah. And I'm like still trudging along. And I'm thinking, I'm not as smart as Hannah. I can't do this thing. And that's the imposter syndrome. However, Hannah, shout out to you because you are exceedingly bright. Overworking, putting in excessive hours, anxiety about evaluation, have some of that. Imposter cycle, that is where you alternate between over preparation and procrastination, back and forth, back and forth. Difficulty asking for help, downplaying your own expertise, pressure of the academy, and pressure of the academy. One of my PhD friends, the first couple weeks of my PhD, he called me and said, I want to tell you something. In academia, the PhD is a club. In academia, the PhD is a club, and they don't want you in it. And they're going to make it very hard for you to get in that club. Well, anyways, I thought as I was looking at the psalm for today, that it matched quite well with those of us who have the imposter syndrome from time to time. I picked the King James Version because I like its language flow, plus I remember it from my childhood. Psalm 60:12, through God we shall do valiantly, for it is he that shall tread down our enemies. Through God we shall do valiantly. The idea is that the imposter syndrome, my idea for this psalm, is that the imposter syndrome pulls us out of faith. The imposter syndrome pulls us out of confidence in God. But listen to the psalmist. Through God, we shall do valiantly. It's not we might fumble along. It's not we might trip and barely scrape our way to the finish line. The Bible says in Psalm 60:12, through God, we shall do valiantly. For those of you on chemo right now, you shall do valiantly. For those of you that are seeking to lose weight and help your diabetes diagnosis or the diabetes diagnosis, you shall do valiantly. I have a ministry season in Thailand coming up in about a week. I'm looking forward to it. But by God's grace, we shall do valiantly. Jonathan and Troy Hart will be meeting me there, the Lord willing, and Pastor James and Pastor Tricia. We shall do valiantly. Not we shall do valiantly ourselves, but through God we shall do valiantly. You know what? This is so firing up to me because there's no imposter in God. Right? There's no fraud in God. There's no worry in God. God is totally at ease with who he is. God is God, and he shall not fail, never has, never will. And through God, we shall do valiantly. And so today, the psalm is to remind you and me that when that imposter syndrome comes our way, we look at it inside ourselves and we say, you know what, imposter syndrome? We shall do valiantly. I called a coach that I use for my PhD. His name is Glenn. He's Dr. Glenn. I called Dr. Glenn and I said, hey, Dr. Glenn, I'm feeling the imposter syndrome on this data analysis section. He called me right away. He said, you're not an imposter, you're the future Dr. Redford. Well, that's pretty cool to be encouraged. I'm not really after being Dr. Redford. I'm just after doing the PhD to keep a promise I made to God, Dr. Glandon, and myself when I was about 8 to 10 years old. But nonetheless, I remind you today, you are not an imposter. Through God, you shall do valiantly. Be bold, be strong, for the Lord thy God is with thee. I shall not be afraid, right? Remember the old song. God, I pray for everyone viewing today. I thank you for them. I bless you for them. And I ask that as they move forward in the initiatives of their life, they will be